What's up everybody, welcome back. In today's video I want to start doing a bit of optimization. So if you follow my other tutorial series about the inventory, we also did some optimization in there. We started using soft object references, so that was a little bit more memory oriented. And for this one I want to start with something else. So we're going to start doing a little bit of network optimization, and we're going to take a look at our multicast events. So before we dive into it, I'd like to mention if you want to get your hands on the project file, you can become a member of the YouTube channel or become a Patreon, and then you will get access to the premium channels in the Discord, which will also give you access to some download. So let's just dive into today's video. So let's open up our hero base character, and as I mentioned, we're going to start taking a look at multicast events. So those are quite heavy on the network performance, and you quite want to avoid them if you can. So we're going to try and replace most of them by using RepNotify. So you might wonder why we didn't do that right to begin with. Well, I feel like it's kind of like how you learn math or physics in high school. So they start with the basics and they keep expanding. And I feel like it just makes a lot more sense if you know what's actually happening. And it's just a bit more clear when using multicast events. Although RepNotifies are a better way to handle this, and RepNotifies will also give you some other options. But we're gonna talk about that later. Let's just start with removing some of our multicast. So I want to start in the fire weapon event. So if we take a look at our server fire weapon and we scroll a little bit to the right, we have our server fire weapon events. And if we take a look at this one, these are actually 3 multicast events for the montage, the fire sound, and the muzzle flash. And these are events that don't have an input, so that makes it pretty simple to just replace them with a RepNotify. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a boolean for this, and we're going to toggle that boolean on and off, or true and false. And every time the boolean changes, it's going to fire an event, and that will take care of the multicasting, sort of. So let's just start with creating the variable. So that's a boolean, and I'm going to call it rep. So I usually put rep in front of it if it's RepNotify that I solely use for multicasting, but that's whatever you prefer. So I'm going to call it rep, and then fire weapon events. So with the variable selected on the right side, we can go to the replication setting and we can select RepNotify. And if we do that and we scroll up, then in between our functions, there's a new function that appeared that is called onRep fire weapon event. So that's the name of the variable. So what this does, every time the server changes this new variable, this event will fire on all clients. So we can simply, or this function, it's not an event. So we can simply go into this function and tell every client what it needs to do when this variable changes. So that's pretty easy to use as kind of a multicast event. So this by default will fire on all instances of the character. And if we go back to the actual variable and select it, then over here we also have the replication condition. And that's something you can play around with. So we have none, so no condition. That's what it's set to by default. And this means it will fire on all of the instances of the character or the actor that you're calling this on. And we also have, for example, initial only, owner only, skip owner. So you can use these to, for example, only fire the function on other clients and the server, for example. So if you want to skip the owner because you already played an animation locally and played the sound locally, and you want to cast the other events to the clients, you can do that by skipping the owner and then just calling all of the default stuff on the actual owner locally as well. So these are settings that give you more options to play around with. We're not going to use them right now, so for now we're going to ignore them, but you just to know that they are there and you can play around with it. So let's go back to the event graph, and we're going to go to our server fire weapon event. So over here, instead of calling the event, we can disconnect this, and then we're going to drag in our new variable, and we want to set it. So this is an event that only fires on the server, executes on server. So you want to make sure that the server sets the variable, otherwise it won't work. And you have to make sure that it's actually changing. So if it's false and you set it to false as well, then for the clients the RepNotify will not fire. So make sure that we grab the boolean, and then we're going to drag off here and add a not boolean. So this will simply flip it around and then plug it in here. So this will make sure our function fires. So now we need to replace this with our multicast, or sorry, we need to replace our multicast events with a new event. So we can simply call that from the function. So we're using a latent node for the montage, so we cannot do that inside of a function, this one. So we need to use an event anyway, but it doesn't need to be a multicast event because this function fires on all instances of the character. So let's just create a new custom event, and I'm going to call this fire weapon events. There we go. And now we can simply grab the play montage. Let's just do it like this. So we want to play the montage. We want to play the fire sound. So that's the second multicast that we're calling in here. So we can grab that one and simply hook it up to the play animation for the mesh. And then we also play our muzzle flash. So we can also do that in the same event. So let's just move it over, plug it in. So we have the fire weapon events that takes care of everything right now. So we can get rid of the old server fire weapon events. And we can also get rid of the multicast events. And then we want to go into the new function. And from here, we're simply going to call our fire weapon events. There we go. So that should make everything work, and now we just got rid of 3 multicast events at once. So that one wasn't too hard. As I mentioned, the actual event didn't use an input, so that's why it's pretty simple to just grab a boolean, flip it around, and that should work. And so next we can take a look at our reload montage, for example. So I'm just going to look for the multicast events. So we have the multicast reload montage, and over here we're also just calling an event. We're not having an input, so we can simply replace that one. So if we go to the play reload montage over here, that's where we actually want to flip the bool for the clients. So if we are a client, we still need to replicate it to the server and make sure that the server sets the variable, otherwise it doesn't work. So what we can do is create a new boolean again, and I'm going to call this rep play reload montage. So then I'm going to set the replication to RepNotify, and that will also create the function again. And then we can simply replace the stuff in the event graph. So what we can do, so we're calling the play reload montage in the input event over here. So I'm just going to grab the switch has authority and the server call. And I'm going to move this over here. We don't have a lot of room to play around with. There we go. So the play reload montage, I'm just going to remove this call, and then I'm going to check if we are the server or not. So if we are a client, we need to make sure that the server sets the boolean. And if we are the server, we can simply drag it in over here, plug it in, and then we're also going to get it, and we're going to flip it around by adding a not bool. and then just plug it in over here. There we go. So now we want to grab this part and also paste that into the server function. This is reload ammo. Make sure you don't mess up. So over here, server reload montage, we want to disconnect this, and over here just set the boolean. And then inside of the new function that's created, we're just going to call our reload montage. So in here, and right now it's still called MultiCast reload montage. So let's just call this one, and then for the event we need to make sure that we set it to not replicated, and we can change the name. There we go. So that will take care of the reloading as well. So for the next one, let's take a look at our dashing. So over here, multicast ability dash, and we're actually using an input over here, but we don't really need this input. So that's another way around it. Sometimes you don't really need them if you double check. So let's just go inside this play dash montage event by double clicking it. And we're actually just grabbing the direction from the animation blueprint anyway, and this is updated each frame, so we might as well just drag it in directly over here and just plug it in to the switch, and then we don't need the actual input. So let's just get rid of that one, compile and save it. Now if we go back to our multicast event on the character, so we can get rid of this pin. And then we still need the direction in here, but if we look, we're only using it server side to add the dash impulse. So what we can do with this one is just get rid of the branch over there, and let's just get rid of the input as well. And we can move it over to the ability dash that runs on the server. So for now, let's just hook it up like this. And then if we are the server, we can actually call it directly over here in the ability dash. If we have authority, plug it in like this. And in these events, we have the proper inputs ready. So now we don't need the direction input in our multicast event. And we can use this to just play the animation. And then over here, we're adding the impulse only server side, so that should take care of our issue. So we can simply create our new boolean now, and I'm going to call this rep-montage. So again, that's RepNotify. And then over here for the ability dash event, so we don't need to call our multicast anymore. Let's get rid of that one, and we're going to set our new bool. So plug it in over here, make sure you grab the current value and flip it around. Plug it in over here. So if we are the server, we're going to set it directly, and if we are a client, we need the server to do it for us. So instead of calling the multicast event, we're going to plug in the setter over here as well in the server event. So we can get rid of the multicast call. And then for the multicast, we want to make sure that it's a non-replicated event now. And we can get rid of the MC. We're already using that, so let's just call it ability dash montage. Something like that. And we don't need the direction input, so let's just remove it as well. And then in the new onRep event, we can simply call our dash montage, and that should take care of it. So compile and save that one as well. And then if we go back to the event graph, well, we did a few of them right now, so we might just want to check if they are working. So we have the fire montage, the fire sound, the muzzle flash, and then for the reload montage and the dashing. So those are all of the things that we changed. So I'm just going to launch a game quickly. I'll be back when the lobby is up. So just running a quick free-for-all match right now. And let's start with the client, why not? So we still have a fire sound, we have a muzzle flash, and we have our animation playing. So those are working. Our dash montage is still working. And if we reload, we can still see it working on both screens. So that's actually good to go. Now we can double check server side. So we can see the animation playing, we see muzzle flashes, impact effects. We can dash and we can reload. So we should be good to go. So let's just close that down. So we have the usual simulate physics errors, but nothing code related. So that's good to go. So let's just continue by removing multicast events. So let's take a look at one a little bit more interesting right now. So for example, if we go to the server bullet trace over here, we're calling our multicast bullet fx, and if we go to the actual event, so we're using the hit result as an input, and we do actually need it this time. So what we can do, for example, we can create a RepNotify variable of the hit result, and then make sure that every time the RepNotify is fired, this should be updated, so we can plug in the variable over here, and that should take care of things. But then we run into a little bit of an other issue. So over here, this is the shotgun branch, and we're actually looping through this 8 times or 6 times, depending on the shotgun shot count. So you're gonna have a lot of RepNotify events firing just frame after frame. So this is going to be still not the best way to handle it. So what we can do to work our way around that, for example, is create a hit result variable with a RepNotify, but we're going to make it an array. So let's start by doing that. So I'm going to drag off the hit result, promote to variable, and I'm going to call this my rep bullet hit. Oh. There we go. And then I'm going to turn this one into an array. So let's change it. That doesn't really matter. And we also want to set it to a RepNotify. So when we set this array, the RepNotify will fire. Then we can go into the server bullet trace function. And over here, we want to use local variables. So we can create an array with the local variable of a hit result. So let's do that first. Drag off here, promote to local variable, local hit results. And then we're going to turn that one into an array as well. So for the shotgun branch, let's get rid of the multicast call. And then we can grab our local hit results and simply add a new one to it. Plug in the actual hit result and plug it back into the execution. And then if we go down for the normal fire weapon, so for a pistol or a rifle, for example, we can simply set the new array as well. So we're going to drag in the hit result and add the hit result from the trace. So get rid of the multicast event. And then at the end of the function, we're going to set our RepNotify variable. And we can plug in our local array to just transfer all of the hits at once. So plug it in like this. No. And then make sure you also reconnect the other branch for the normal weapon firing. And then we can go into the new event that's created. So we have our rep bullet hit. And in here we can simply call our multicast bullet fx. So we don't need the hit result input in here. So as a little side note, if you drag it in over here, this will not always work. So sometimes it will just read the old values from the variable. And I notice if you just do it in the event graph and plug it into a new function, then that little extra tick that's happening will make sure that the variable is actually updated. So that's just a little side note. So we can go back to the MultiCast event, and we just want to set it to a not replicated event. So we can change the name as well if we would like to. And then we're going to plug in a for each loop, so we can get rid of the input as well. And grab a for each loop, plug in our rep bullet hit, and the loop body just connect it back to the branch. So that should work. And that should still replicate the shotgun impacts to the clients as well. So let's take a look at the next one. So for the next one, let's take a look at the selecting weapons. So we have our multicast select weapon over here. And for this one, we're also using an input. And if we double check it, we don't really need it. So we might just drag in the weapon inventory names and grab our current weapon, and that will actually give us the same result. So what we can do over here is grab our weapon inventory names array, and we're gonna get a copy and just plug in our active weapon index. So if we use that as an input for these functions, then we can get rid of the actual input on the event. So let's just delete that one. So as you can see in the multicast call, we don't need it anymore. So we can get rid of it over here as well. And then we can simply use a boolean again to make sure that this actually fires. So the multicast call over here can just go as well. And then we're going to create our new boolean. So I'm going to call this rep weapon select. So let's turn it, hello, there we go, thank you. Let's turn it into a single boolean and then make sure that we set the replication to RepNotify. So over here we want to add a has authority check. So this is a local event, it's an input event. Is it? No, it's not. It's a server event. So let me double check over here. Server select weapon. So that's from the switch weapon, and over here we have a branch that actually makes sure we are the server. So this is actually a server event, so we don't need the has authority switch, I'm sorry. And we can just plug in the bool over here. And then grab our rep weapon select and make sure that we flip it around. So it's a not bool. And plug it in over here again. And then for the multicast event, so we do actually want to keep the multicast event. Let me double check quickly. I'm sorry, we don't want to keep it. I got a little bit confused with another event. So we can get rid of the multicast event and we can just call our select weapon event. So if we go to the new onRep function over here, onRep weapon select, simply call select weapon. There we go. So that will take care of the weapon selection. And then we also have our weapon switching. So that's a little bit to the right over here. And this is the one I got a little bit confused with, because over here we are using an input event. So we're going to use a has authority switch over here. But let's get to that a little bit later. First of all, for this one, we're using the actual inventory index of the weapon. And we kind of want to keep it, so there's not really a way around it. So what we can do in this case, we can create a rep variable, but it's going to be an integer, and we're going to use that to replace the input over here. So let's create the variable first, and I'm going to call this a rep and then switch to weapon index. So the index of the weapon we want to switch to, and that's an integer. And then I'm going to set replication to RepNotify. So first of all, let's take care of the input event over here. And for this one, we want to make sure that after we checked if we can switch weapons, we're going to check if we are the server or not. So input event, that's locally, and that can be the server or a client, so we still need to check over here. If we are the server, we can simply set our variable over here and then plug in the weapon index that comes from the can switch weapon function. And if we are a client, we're going to use the server replicated event, so server switch weapon. We can call that one. And we can also plug in the same variable over here. And then for the server version, we want to get rid of the multicast call and simply set the variable over here as well. Plug it in like this. So the switch weapon event is the one we don't need anymore. So we can get rid of it over here. And then that should be all of them, I think. So that should be good to go. So we can get rid of this event as well. And then for the multicast event, we're going to make sure that it's a not replicated event again. And then we can change the name if we want to. That's a name that already exists, although I did just remove that event. So maybe after I compile it. Okay, so that's a little bit of a thing that we forgot. So if we compile it, it's going to complain about the weapon row name input not existing anymore on the select weapon function event. So we can get rid of the input over here. And then compile, and we have another issue. We didn't connect the hit result in the array. So I'm really on fire today. I'm sorry. And over here, we don't need the input and it's actually not here. So we just want to refresh the node. And we finally got rid of all of the errors. So if you did the work carefully, you probably don't even have them yourself. So I just forgot to connect the array element. And because I removed the input over here, it complained in the onRep event because the input was still there, so I had to refresh the node. And the other one was in begin play where I forgot to remove the input pin for the switching weapons. But let's get back to what we were actually doing, and that was the switching weapons with the input event. Oh, freaking really. So that's over here. So we got rid of the event and we want to make sure that I was renaming this event. So I'm back on track. I'm sorry. So let's get rid of the multicast over here. And because I compiled, we can actually change it to switch weapon now. So that's fine as well. And then we want to go into the onRep event and make sure that we actually call the event. So switch weapon. And this shouldn't need an input. So we're going to get rid of the input over here and then simply drag in the rep variable and plug it in like this. There we go. So this time it updated the node when I removed the input. So I'm not sure where the error came from the last time, but okay. So this should be good to go as well. So for this switch weapon, there's actually one thing I forgot. If we go into the gameplay loot folder and we have our weapon pickup, so in here we're actually calling our switch weapon event as well, and we want to make sure that we disconnect this, and we want to actually set the new variable. So let me grab my notes in here quickly to make sure I don't screw up, because I screwed up a few things today. So yeah, we're gonna set the rep variable, so we can simply drag off the player character and set our rep switch to weapon index. And in here we can plug in the local weapon inventory slot and make sure we move over the pins and get rid of the actual call. There we go. So now this should work if we pick up a weapon as well. So let's just run a little test for these last ones, and then we're probably gonna wrap it up today because I'm not really on fire. So we did the bullet impact, we did the select weapon and switch weapon. So let's just run our multiplayer test. So the game is running. So let's check the impact effects, that's working, and let's check one with the shotgun as well, because we have the multiple impacts over here. So I'm a client, I'm gonna grab the shotgun, and then the server should see all of the impact as well. So that's working. And then we did our weapon switching, so the reload was working before, we knew that. And if I'm switching weapons, that's all also working on both sides, so that's good to go. Let's check the server side. So impacts are working, and if we pick up the rifle, you can see the select weapon is working, and we can also switch weapons. And my actual rifle impacts in auto fire work as well. So all of that stuff is working, and we got rid of quite a few multicast events. So in the next episode we have a few more to go, and then we're also gonna do a little bit of soft object references as well, probably. For today I'm gonna wrap it up, because I mentioned I'm not really on fire, I'm making small mistakes and it gets a little bit annoying and messy, so we're almost at half an hour, so let's just wrap it up. Thanks for watching everybody, talk to you later, I'll be back soon, bye bye.